All right, David. All cylinders are firing on the new setup. We're here over fiber optic, sportsbook time, no ghost hotels. But David, I have to say, you're looking very sharp. Your frame rate is looking super smooth. How are you today, David?
Very good, Jason. Great to be with you.
Great to be with you. So there have been a lot of changes that have been made over here at HQ to ensure that we have the maximum audio quality, the maximum visual quality. And, this is not all being done, David, simply for the love of technology or for the sake of having something to do. It's actually been quite an effort to make this happen. One of the main reasons I wanted to do it is that it really allows me to increase the interactivity between you and I and other guests that appear on the show. I'm going to give everybody a little peek behind the kimono, David, so they can see some of the new technology that we have here. You now are able to enjoy a screen share of whatever we might be talking about during the show, which gives you an opportunity to interact with me and the material that we're talking about to provide the maximum information for the audience. It also allows you to see me so that you and I can have a very personal conversation. And the new fiber optic link really has reduced the latency. So what people have perceived as me interrupting was me trying to conduct a normal conversation with all of this technology in the way, which causes quite a delay and can really hurt the interactivity. So I'm hopeful that some of these changes will have a big impact on the overall quality and presentation of the show. And thank you for helping me get it all straightened out.
Well, it's a pleasure, Jason, and I take my hat off to you because I'm fairly technophobic, and my brain would just go into a stall mode if I think I had to weave through the system like you seem to be able to do quite well.
Yeah, it took quite a lot of effort, David. And I have to say, you've spoken quite a bit about how social engineers have been adamantly pursuing us and really trying to stop our progress. I will have to say that it was quite a challenge to get this all going with the social engineering attacks going on. So now that they're kind of, I'm not going to say that they're done or out of the way, but I've gotten a bit in front of them and had enough time to be able to focus on this system to try to improve the quality of our show and improve the experience for our viewers and our sponsors on patreon.com/reverse CSI storyboards, patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, and subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth. But before the little technical setback, you were telling us about some of the new information on reverse CSIscripts.com. Everybody knows that's your free website. What were you wanting to point out about all that, David?
Well, thank you, Jason. I've updated the website recently, and I put in more of those black blobs, around the periphery of what is essentially a map of what was known as the All Red Line, which are the links around the British Empire to the colonies through the underwater cable telegraph system that allowed,
Yes.
obviously, people in the city of London to potentially do some front running on some really lucrative events, which could include, for example, the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. So if you zoom out a little bit, let me just give people a feel for what might appear to be a rather enigmatic title. And I'll just read the first paragraph from Wikipedia of the United States Senate Special Committee to Investigate Crime in Interstate Commerce. So the first paragraph reads, the United States Senate Special Committee to Investigate Crime in Interstate Commerce was a special committee of the United States Senate which existed from 1950 to 51, and which investigated organized crime which crossed state borders in the United States. The committee became popularly known as the Kefauver Committee. Now, I don't know if I got that pronunciation right. Kefauver, that's Kefauver Committee, because of its chairman, Senator Estes Kefauver. The term Capo di Tutti Capi was introduced to the US public by the Kefauver Commission, sometime presumably in the 50s. So our title today is Capo di Tutti Kappa, that's our title, is spelt Kappas, Kappas, which suggests the work that I'm currently doing, that when they investigated organized crime retreated behind the scenes into an extortionate operation on some of these ancient Kappa titled Greek life societies. And the two Kappa life society, Greek life societies that really fascinate me, if we go to the site with the map, just go back to that, the map of the updated website that I did, down on the left-hand side, you'll see the 3, 4, 5 organizations that I believe have conspired together or neglectfully assembled a force that was responsible for the 9/11 attack on the United States of America. So over on the left, we've got Phi Beta Kappa and Kappa Beta Phi. So very quickly, Phi Beta Kappa and Kappa Beta Phi were both established in 1776, 3 years after the famous Boston Tea Party, where some people dressed as American Indians got on a ship, a British East India ship, and tossed key trunks containing tea into Boston Harbor. So you and I have been using this language borrowed from the live action role play quite a lot, and I believe that we can develop an argument that the Boston Tea Party was actually staged by agents of the British East India Company with counterparts in the colonies at the time to provoke ultimately what turned into the Revolutionary War of Independence, and the United States colonies breaking away from the crown, if you will, to form what might be described as a mercantilist society where everything has a price. Fast forward to these two Greek life societies, Phi Beta Kappa and Kappa Beta Phi, to 911 on the 47th floor of the North Tower of WTC1 on the morning of 911. I believe representatives of those two Greek life societies, Phi Beta Kappa and Kappa Beta Phi, under cover of a shareholder meeting, staged a live action role play event intended to overthrow the government of the United States. And they came very close to succeeding. And the only thing that they didn't calculate, and I would argue, and I don't mean to be dismissive, but I argue that these people, irrespective of how much money they've got, and for example, Michael Bloomberg is rated to be the 9th richest man in the world, and he's Kappa Beta Phi, together with Wilbur Ross, while Bill Clinton is Phi Beta Kappa.
Yeah.
Right. So irrespective of the academic honor that they get by being elected to Phi Beta Kappa, or the amount of money that they acquire over a period of time, that would be an extraordinary, I think, film, if you will, or whatever people like to make of it from an entertainment point of view, a spy thriller, if we were able to demonstrate on the 47th floor of WTC1 on the morning of 911, representatives of Serco shareholders, including BlackRock and the Teachers Pension Fund, actually representing Phi Beta Kappa and Kappa Beta Phi, conspired together to stage a LARP, a live action role play event, where the American public would be deceived into thinking they were attacked by a guy straddling a yak in a cave in Afghanistan, when in fact there was an attempt to overthrow the government of the United States by force that only failed because a couple of planes left late. The first plane that I alleged left late and put their planning out was the plane that would hit the south face of the South Tower 14 minutes after the impact of flight, was it 11, on the north face of the North Tower. And that's because that second plane left 14 minutes late. Had it not left late, the air traffic controllers, I believe associated with Serco, would have steered the second plane into the south face of the South Tower and it would have hit the south face of the South Tower at the same minute, possibly the same second, as the plane that hit the north face of the North Tower. And that would be an extraordinary shock and awe event for the United States to get their head around. Now, in Washington, the second plane to hit, or intended to hit its target in Washington, was Flight 93, that allegedly crashed in the field outside Shanksville, Pennsylvania, embarrassingly not leaving enough debris to fill half a dumpster. So a 110-ton plane, civilian plane, makes a crater where there's not enough debris to fill half a dumpster, 41 minutes after it should have been hitting Washington in the Capitol building. So now just going back to the Eisenhower comment, and Eisenhower was made an honorary member of Phi Beta Kappa after his performance
Why
in the
honorary?
war. That I don't know. That is to say, he wasn't elected when he was at university. Subsequent to his career as a general, the commander-in-chief of the Allied forces in Europe, he gets to be elected Phi Beta Kappa. And I find that interesting because during the Second World War, a man who I believe his name should live in infamy, called David Sarnoff, took care of the communication system for Eisenhower and helped set up Radio Free Europe, which basically brought propaganda into the Eastern Bloc of countries and Russia. So Eisenhower, in his closing speech, I think, to the American people in 1961, he warned of the military-industrial complex. Apparently, the speechwriters had made it the military-industrial congressional complex because of the backhanding, the pork barreling, the kickbacks, and so on, running around the triangle of military companies, industrial companies, and Congress. But when he gave that warning, I believe he was thinking, perhaps, or maybe I can infer that he was referring specifically to David Sarnoff, who was the founder of RCA, Radio Corporation of America, and the person who would have authorized RCA to set up a subsidiary in the UK called RCA-GB 1929. Now, RCA-GB 1929 was set up in a very interesting year. It was the year of the Great Depression, and it was the year of the only remaining chapter of Kappa Beta Phi in Wall Street to have been established. So isn't that interesting? RCA-GB is formed in 1929. The Great Depression begins, and the chapter Kappa Beta Phi is launched in New York. Modern day Kappa Beta Phi include some really interesting people from this coming election, including Wilbur Ross, who helped restructure Donald Trump's debts after the debacle with the Trump shuttle. We have Larry Fink, the chief executive officer of BlackRock Inc., the world's largest shadow banker. And I think Americans should be troubled by the idea that there's someone operating behind the scenes with $6.3 trillion of assets under management as BlackRock Inc., that has major shareholdings in a number of key companies associated with 911, including, I believe, Serco, which is the world's largest non-state air traffic controller that could have been controlling the aircraft that were allegedly hijacked by the Bin Laden group on 911, has a major controlling stake, not a majority stake, but a controlling stake in Pepsi, who's one of whose directors, marketing directors, I think responsible for the Blue Pepsi program, his name of Tim Davie, became the Director General of the BBC. He should have been tasked with cleaning up the BBC for its role in hiding the pedophile blackmail ring established by Jimmy Savile over 30 or 40 years, but he didn't. And Tim Davie is now the head honcho at an outfit called BBC Studios, which is
What's that?
pumping programs into the United States, including
All right.
Killing Eve, and I'll come to that in a minute. Okay, then we have a woman by
David,
the name of Anne Sun.
sorry to interrupt, but before you get on too much of a roll, I want you to keep in mind that this is our relaunched YouTube preview, and so we're just about we could probably push it to 10 minutes before we transition over to patreon.com/reverse CSI storyboards, patreon.com/crowdsource the truth, and subscribestar.com/crowdsource the truth. Before you continue, David, I just want to point out that as I'm watching, it took a minute to get everything dialed in, but your playback, your frame rate, your lip sync all looks much better. We've got the sound issue under control, and our interactivity is great. So my goals for implementing this new fiber optic system and some of the other things that we haven't really spoken about, but you have been critical in beta testing with me, are all in effect. I want to thank John Doe for using Super Chat on Crowdsource the Truth 2, where viewers can be enjoying us, David, in full HD 1080p resolution. And I know a lot of these things sound just like sort of, tech fanciness, but it's interesting to think, David, how, when I first saw your broadcasts, you were a voice coming out of a crappy speakerphone with all this distracting, visual, unrelated stuff going on, and you couldn't be seen and understood. We then, we got a visual presentation of you. You've upgraded some of your technology to improve your end. We've got this upgrade here. And now it's just fascinating to listen to you talk and see the presentation. So I hope people are appreciating it. And I really do thank the sponsors that have made this possible. So Tim Davey, he's kind of a bad guy there, producing shows to corrupt people, no?
Well, you see, I think that would be getting ahead of ourselves. You see, I don't know the motives of these people doing what they're doing. I mean, we talked about the range or the gap between being simple or stupid and being clever. So many of these people, I think, are acting in what they think is good faith, but the complexity of the puppeteer operating behind the scenes is such that it's extremely difficult. I think we've talked about the sandbox. And when you're in the sandbox, how do you recognize you're in a sandbox? When the controllers are outside the sandbox, or many of the most powerful people that you should normally go to are inside the sandbox as well. So you've got this picture now of this woman who's one of the stars of Killing Eve. So let me just go back to Tim Davey. So Tim Davey with BBC Studios is responsible for introducing a lot of programming content from the BBC, including Killing Eve and Sherlock. Another woman that historically was responsible for bringing Killing Eve and Sherlock in was a woman by the name of Anne Sarnoff. Right. Very, very powerful name in terms of the events that perhaps were concerning Eisenhower in that closing speech when he talked about the military-industrial complex. Because Anne Sarnoff's husband is the great nephew, if that's the right word, of David Sarnoff, who was on the Marconi telegraph system, allegedly. Some people say he was lying, allegedly, when the Titanic appears to have been steered into the iceberg, right? Because there was a message sent to the Titanic bridge, as I understand it, to change course 20 minutes from a great circle course, and it changed course into the iceberg, behind which was a ship called the SS Mount Temple. But I digress. Back to Anne Sarnoff. So Anne Sarnoff is, so to speak, in the Sarnoff family, and the Sarnoff family, certainly David Sarnoff, is responsible for running a patent racket starting at least in the 1920s with the Marconi patent. And I believe that that Sarnoff effectively nicknamed the General. He liked that title. I think he died in 1970. He left a legacy to his children. I'm sorry? Yes.
David Sarnoff.
I'm sorry?
Was it David Sarnoff? Who was the general?
David Sarnoff was nicknamed he was elected or appointed to Brigadier General by Eisenhower.
Right.
So he carried that nickname right through to his death. He was
But I
very
was just
proud of it.
straightening in my own mind. There's so many Sarnoffs, David. It's sometimes tough to keep them straight. And we've only got a few minutes left. We'll be going into great detail on the Sarnoffs and their involvement in the foundation of Serco. I didn't get a chance to mention this to you when we were on the phone talking about this last night, but I don't know if you were aware of this other Sarnoff, David. Do you know about Conchita Sarnoff? Do you know who that is?
No, I don't know that.
Well, I'm not sure exactly how she got into the Sarnoff family, but she wrote a book called Traffic King about Jeffrey Epstein. And apparently it's got some explosive revelations about Epstein, and she's Conchita Sarnoff, I think married to somebody in the Sarnoff family, or at some point she was. So what's their tie to Jeffrey Epstein, and why does he have anything to do with the Serco family?
Yeah, we'll check that. And by way of background, because you and I, we always discuss the title for our shows, right? And you are pithy, is that the right word? And economic with the words, and I tend to expand up to try and describe everything. But one of my offerings to you before we finally decided on the title was BBC Sarnoff POTUS, as in the British Broadcasting Corporation Sarnoff, President of the United States, with the question mark, is he or she, if it ever should prevail, a Capo de Tutti Kappa, that is Kappas? Because what I believe has happened is that the criminal organization addressed by that Kerfauer committee of the 1950s retreated from the limelight, right? Because obviously organized crime doesn't want to be in the front of all of these mob killings, etc. And I believe they appointed an organization to execute these hits and live action role plays with the skeleton of RCAGB 1929, that in 1988, through a management buyout and an IPO.
Oh, we just lost you, David. I don't know why that occurred. Boy, I tell you, there's so many, nothing's easy. Progress does not arrive without a few bumps in the road, but that's okay. We'll get David back, and we're going to be starting our sponsor exclusive show in just under 10 minutes on patreon.com/reverse CSI storyboards, patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, and subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Something going on right there that I've got to address. We'll see everybody in 8 minutes. Thanks for your patience. Thanks for your support. And thanks for watching.